Listen, I never hitchhiked before. I just really want to be careful. Can I ask you something?
Sure.
Are you weird?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am weird.
You are weird.
Yes.
You're weird, thank God you're weird. The last ride I had was so normal, it was disgusting. He picked me up in Santa Barbara. By the time we got to Carmel, he wanted to marry me.
Oh, yeah. I thought you never hitchhiked before.
You are listening to Dark Notes Podcast. I'm Lisa, and I'm here with my partner in crime, Shane.
Hello.
Today's episode is
Spook Lights.
Pay attention.
Okay, for thousands of years in every culture, it seems like strange lights have been seen in the skies. There's lots of names for these: ghost lights, spook lights, will-o'-the-wisp, jack-o'-lantern, corpse candles, fairy lights, elf fire, etc. And yeah, like I said, these things have been seen forever.
Forever. Right.
Yeah. They're usually associated, especially in the UK in the past, with the fairy realm or ghosts or elemental spirits. And lately, in the 20th and 21st century, they're thought of as UFOs or aliens, you know.
Right.
Yeah. It's just that, a different face on the same thing. But
right.
Yeah, these are anomalous lights. These, now, some people, materialist scientific types, say that these are phosphine oxidation, swamp gas, some kind of like decaying organic matter creates a flame, blah blah blah, and or ball lightning. Now those things happen, but these are not those things.
Right. It's pretty clear when you read an account.
Yeah.
It is something like that. Like it's pretty clear.
Yeah. What we're talking about is something very strange, unexplained, and these lights seem like they have personalities, like they almost put on a show for people.
They seem to be intelligent.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's, to be clear, that's what we're talking about. There's notable sites all over the world where these things have been seen over and over and over for hundreds of years sometimes. Some of the famous ones are the Joplin Spook Light in Missouri, the Brown Mountain Lights, which are close to me, about 35-40 miles away in Brown Mountain, North Carolina, Morganton, North Carolina. Marfa, Texas has a famous spook light. Paulding Light in Michigan. The Mako Light in Wilmington, North Carolina, where I used to live. And these, especially the ones that are associated with a specific place, there's usually a legend.
Right. And they're very similar legends.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's a lot of them. It's a lot of these specific sites are by railroad tracks.
Yep.
And the ones by railroad trucks. Usually it's the same story. It's either a railroad crash or the death of a railroad man, and he's decapitated and he's out
I
looking for
know
his
there's a lot
head.
of stories with like decapitation and like I even thought of the headless horseman. Sorry, just because it's a plot.
No,
But
absolutely, me too. And it's yeah, the light is supposedly the lantern, them out looking,
right, right.
and but yeah, they're associated with cemeteries, railroads, swamps,
Mm-hmm.
fatal car accident sites, murder sites. So there's a strong association with death with these lights.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
And mostly, I'd say, they're associated with death, especially in America.
Right.
Yeah, it's, and there's some.
And some of the sites are cemeteries too, where they see them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of sightings in cemeteries of these things. And some people, some cultures have taken the seeing these things as an omen, like a death omen.
Yes, a death omen. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the UK, where, especially in the past, these are associated with the fairy realm.
Right.
And the legend is that if you follow the lights, you will end up in either in fairyland or dead.
Right.
Yeah, I'd rather go to fairyland.
Right. It could go out. It could go either way.
But and one of the first oral legends of this, where the name Will o' the Wisp comes from the UK, there was a guy named Will who was a bad guy, and he died and went to the pearly gates in heaven where St. Peter was. And St. Peter said, "Look, you're a rotten son of a bitch. I'm going to send you back down to earth to prove yourself. I'm going to give you a second chance to prove yourself and do good." Well, he went back to earth, did even worse this time. And so St. Peter said, "You know what? You're not welcome in hell or heaven." So, yeah, we're just going to curse you to the earth forever. So, because the guy was such a bad guy. So he cursed him to the earth. And the devil was so impressed by this that he gave him a burning coal to light his way on earth. So that's when you see the Will of the Wisp, the lights, the light is the coal from the devil's piece of coal that he gave to Will.
That's an interesting old accounts, like false fire, like people see fire.
Yes, and yeah, they look a lot of the times. That's what they look like.
Right.
It's like your first instinct is, oh, it's like burning fire,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, the older accounts wouldn't have reference light bulbs and lights in any other way than fire, probably.
Exactly. And it's very interesting you brought that up, because a recent thing, a lot of the accounts I've listened to in the past few years, people talk about how similar they are to LED lights.
Right.
You know how when LED lights came out, it was weird. A lot of people were like, "Oh, I don't like the way that looks because it's so bright and different." And yeah, so a lot of people recently say they look like colored LED lights. Like that's the first thing that pops in their head.
Right. So it changes based on
time, technology, and culture.
Whatever.
Absolutely. But yeah, there's also been legends that wherever these things are seen, there's buried treasure there. Things like
Yes.
That was an old one, yeah.
Yeah, I read a lot of accounts that have like a treasure associated with them.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. It's very interesting. There's even been a couple of things I've read online where with the missing 411 thing, people are like, oh, they followed the lights, you know.
Right.
That's definitely an old belief with these things, that if you follow the lights, you will disappear into some other realm or death, you know, which I guess death is some other realm, but
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, these things have also over and over been seen where Bigfoot and other weird creatures have been seen. That's one of the most interesting things about this. Stan Gordon, who wrote the book Silent Invasion about the UFO flap in Pennsylvania from 1973 to 1974, there were accounts almost daily of UFOs, Bigfoot, strange lights, and these lights were all over the place. Every time something was seen, sometimes it was just a light, sometimes it was lights plus Bigfoot, sometimes it was lights plus craft plus Bigfoot. It was, yeah, these things were seen all the time. And around the same time, on the other side of the country, early 70s, Ron Moorhead and his friends were camping where the Sierra Sounds tapes come from. They were camping. They had a spot in California they camped at, and they had interactions with Bigfoot at their campsite, and they would see these lights all the time.
Yes. And then they had the ones that were the shape of the light was like the
rod.
Thank you.
The rod of light, and almost looked like a lightsaber from Star Wars without the handle. Yeah. And oh God, I can't remember. Somebody else reported those recently, and I can't remember who it was. Oh, it's killing me. I know I have it written down somewhere, but yeah. Yeah, they saw the lights up there. Actually, that was the early 70s where the Sierra Sound Bigfoot tapes are from, the noises of Bigfoot, which is, if you haven't heard it, look it up. It's amazing.
Yes.
It's awesome. But yeah, even in their recent trips to that campsite have seen the lights. Ron Moorhead and his wife and daughter and friends have seen the lights. They're still there. God,
I love that, don't you?
I do too.
The lights are.
I love the association of these lights with other phenomenon, which seems like the norm. It doesn't seem rare. It seems like that this happens a lot. Like almost like the lights are the first sign that something's weird here, but yeah, I'm fascinated with these things. My great grandmother saw the lights. Her sister died, and they had went to her and someone else had went to her sister's house to clean it out after her death, like very recently after her death, a couple of days or something. And when they opened up the front gate to the front yard, a orb flew out of the house, out of the gate, and into the sky.
Wow.
And to her, it was no question. Oh, that was my sister.
Right. That was the norm. Yes.
Yeah, that was the norm. She had always heard of these things, and this was Tennessee, Eastern Tennessee, but she had always heard about these things, and maybe, I don't know if she ever saw them before that, but she was well aware of them.
Right.
And back then, everybody associated these things with spirits, you know.
Yes, and there were so many also just death rituals back then.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like little things that you did, like that was normal, and everybody knew about it, you know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's just the way it was, just how it was.
Right.
But yeah, I know I'm going to butcher this, but I want to mention it. Barbara Fisher, who does the podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
6 Degrees of John Kill.
Highly recommend
it. Yeah, she had I'll try and do it as best I can with this. She was living in Athens, Ohio, in her 20s, had lots of friends, and her friends lived in a rural setting, a lot of woods around, and they constantly had the lights show up on their property, and to the point where it had almost got boring, where it's like, oh yeah, the lights are here again. And they would call over Barbara and the rest of their friends, and they would witness these things over and over. But there's a story where that Barbara talked about. I think she's talked about it on her podcast, but also on Strange Familiars.
Yes, I believe so.
Where the lights, it was July 4th, which is interesting. I'll bring up in a minute. Her and another friend of hers didn't like fireworks, so while everybody set off fireworks in the front, they went to the back. Right? Yeah, and these lights, they saw the lights. There were a few of them, and they got closer and closer. And Barbara started singing, and they noticed while she was singing, the lights got closer and closer, like came towards them. And she said, one of the lights came right up to them, and that when they could look inside, and there was a little naked fairy with wings.
Right, that is insane.
Yeah, and she flipped, of course. But yeah, very interesting story.
Yes,
and we highly recommend her podcast.
Definitely, yes. It's one of our favorites.
Yeah, but one thing that's been noticed by a couple people, the author Terry Ray definitely wrote about this in his book, is the days of the highest sightings of these things are New Year's Eve and July 4th.
Right.
And that maybe it's because everybody's out and looking at the sky because of fireworks that day. Maybe it's because these things want to be seen, so they're out on, who knows. But there's a high number of sightings on those days. And there's been a lot of these sightings in the past few years. More and more. People who have no clue of the legends, of the history of these things. People who've never heard of a spook light or...
Right.
Yeah.
Report. Right.
Yeah, they've been seeing these things over and over and over. So...
What the was that?
That was cool.
That looks like a flying saucer. Whatever that thing was, I don't know. I don't know what that was.
real accounts from?
This is John Keel's account from the book, The Mothman Prophecies. This is where he starts seeing the lights. Okay. I was disenchanted with the TNT area because of the crowds that were now streaming back there nightly to watch for the newest sensation, flying saucers. I started searching for a private place where I could carry out my observations quietly. Don, Dan, Mary, and myself had interviewed a number of people in the little community of Gallipolis. Is that right? I think I'm right.
We'll go with it.
Yeah. Gallipolis Ferry, a couple miles south of Point Pleasant on Route 2. And I had been impressed by their testimony. House lights frequently dim there, and television sets often acted up late at night. Great blobs of light had been seen on top of the wooded hills in the sparsely settled animal preserve called the Chief Cornstalk Hunting Grounds, just south of the village. One resident was having trouble with poltergeist phenomenon, lights moving through his house, wrappings on the doors and windows, the sounds of babies crying, and women screaming. Telephones malfunctioning, the works. Rolf Lee, a farmer with a big spread in the area, confessed that he had seen so many UFOs over his land that he didn't even pay attention to them anymore. Officer Harold Harmon and I slipped away to Gallipolis Ferry on the night of March 31st, while nearly everyone else headed for the TNT area. We soon saw a number of bright star-like objects which flitted about the sky with rapid zigzag movements. Two local teenagers were sitting on a nearby hilltop next to a roaring bonfire, hoping to lure the UFOs down. I called up to them and asked them to put the fire out, knowing that bright lights tended to repel rather than attract the objects. Harmon fiddled vainly with his police radio. He could get nothing but static. Later, I learned that all the police forces for miles in both directions had constant trouble with their radios that week. Heavy magnetic interference totally disrupted communications among law authorities, while the UFOs carried out their mysterious missions. The destruction of Sheriff Johnson's transmitter was just one small part of the scenario. Telephones, too, went bonkers that week. It seemed as if half the phones in the valley were either out of order altogether or were dogged with crazy beeps and buzzes. Accompanied by the two teenagers, I left Harmon and hiked into the nearby hills in the total blackness. As my eyes became acclimated to the night, I began to distinguish a number of vague purple shapes hovering over a woods on Rolf Lee's property. At first, I thought they might be stars low in the sky, gleaming through the natural haze. But when I flashed my six-celled light at one of these purple blobs, it suddenly and jerkily moved to one side, as if it were jumping out of my light beam. Fascinated, I repeated the experiment several times. Then I tried flashing the light at obvious stars to see if this wasn't just some trick of my eyesight. The stars didn't move naturally. We sat on the hilltop studying the purple blobs for several minutes, when suddenly the whole forest in the valley below lit up and glowed with a bright, eerie purple light. There were no houses or roads down there. It would have been a long hike in the dark, and the boys were reluctant to join me. So we just sat there and stared at the glowing forest until the light faded. The next night, Saturday, April 1st, Mary Heyer and I drove up 5 Mile Creek Road below Gallipolis Ferry until we reached the hilltop, which commanded a view of the hills and valleys I had visited the night before. There was a single farmhouse on the hill, and the people who lived there went to bed at 9:30 each night, being early risers. So the whole area was silent, deserted, and without lights throughout the night. A few minutes after we arrived, Mary pointed out a small reddish light low on a steep wooded hill south of our position. It appeared to be blinking on and off and bobbing up and down in a manner quite different from any of the stars on the horizon. While we watched breathlessly, barely speaking, it slowly circled the distant fields and woods and crossed in front of us, edging closer and closer. The farmhouse was about 75 feet in front of us. The object now appeared to be square or rectangular. It could not be mistaken for a star. It vanished momentarily behind some trees north of the farmhouse, and when it reappeared, it was much closer. Now we could make out a dark form. The red glow seemed to be a window. It hovered about 50 feet off the ground. I thought I could see a shadowy human figure in the, quote, window, but Mary thought it was some kind of partition. This was the only point on which we disagreed. We sat transfixed for several minutes, fully expecting the object to land directly in front of us and ask to be taken to our leader. I finally got out of the car and flashed my powerful beam directly at the object. It responded instantly, quickly shooting straight up into the sky, the red light going out completely. I guess I blew it, I groaned, but there would be other nights and more funny lights. The following night, we returned to the same hilltop. The brilliant night sky was filled with stars and things not on my map. We could easily recognize the UFOs because they were brighter and more brilliantly colored than normal stars. Some were red flashers, some were cold purple blobs, and some were multicolored. Miss Heyer confirmed that they jumped out of the way of my flashlight. I picked out an especially large object and flashed in Morse code, descend. Mary gasped as it began to lose altitude. It looks like it's going down a flight of stairs, she noted. We were watching the famous falling leaf motion, which has been described by many UFO witnesses. About 12:30 a.m., Miss Heyer decided to call it a night. She drove off, leaving me alone in my car, sitting like an idiot, waiting for something to happen. And it did. 1 hour later, at 1:35 a.m., on April 3rd, 1967, I had my best sighting. A clearly defined circular object suddenly zipped down from the sky and passed parallel to my car. It was so colorful that it is burned into my memory. The greenish upper surface was topped by a bright red light. There were reddish portholes or circular lights around the rim. The colors were so brilliant, they were almost unearthly. It disappeared behind some trees to my left. I felt it was very close, perhaps only a few hundred feet from my car. Although it had been in full view for several seconds, I never even thought of picking up the movie camera on the seat beside me.
Right.
I had 3 interesting physical reactions to this sighting. First of all, although I am used to prowling graveyards and TNT areas alone late at night, I was scared to death. My first thought was to start the car and get the hell out of there. But I managed to brace myself, and I did lock the car doors. Second, while I was watching the object, I thought I heard a sizzling or hissing sound. Later, I realized I couldn't be sure if the sound had been real. Third, the next morning, my eyes were sore and red. They felt like they were full of sand. I had a mild case of conjunctivitis, and it persisted for several days. I like that. Yeah.
All right, I have one from Strange Things in the Woods by Steve Stockton.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I've talked to him. He's a nice guy.
The Glowing Ball. I had been over to visit a friend from school who lived nearby. We lived in a semi-rural area, so in this case, nearby meant about 3.5 miles by road. I had originally ridden my... It did it again. I had originally ridden my bicycle over, but when it came time to go home, I was tired and thought I would walk back through the woods. Being in the country, the roads were very hilly, and I felt too tired to ride my bike all the way back. By cutting through the woods in a more or less straight line, I could cut the distance by more than half. I would just leave my bike overnight as I was planning on going back the next day anyway. I told my friend goodbye and struck off through the woods toward home. It was already getting dark, but I didn't really mind. I had taken the shortcut through the woods many times before and knew the route like the back of my hand. I had cleared the first wooded area and entered a large open field. It had once been a cow pasture, but was now just a huge expanse overgrown with weeds. When something caught my eye, on the other side of the field, perhaps a quarter mile or so away, the area was once again heavily forested. Right at the edge of the field, I observed what I can only describe as a large ball of light, about the size of a basketball. It sort of pulsated between orange and red in color. It wasn't really bright, bright enough that I could see that it lit up the lower parts of the trees that were near it. At first, I had assumed maybe it was someone with a large flashlight or maybe even a lantern. But as I got closer, I observed that I could see all the way around and even partially through the ball of light. It slowly and gently bobbed along the right at the edge of the forest at a varying height I estimated to be about 7 to 10 feet off the ground. It was totally noiseless and seemed to travel at a consistent speed forward. I had stopped walking while I observed the ball of light, but decided to try to go in for a closer look. For some reason, at the time, it never occurred to me to be scared. As I got to within approximately 30 yards of the light, it shot almost straight up and disappeared over the treetops and into the woods. I waited around for a few minutes to see if it might reappear, but it unfortunately did not. At that point, I started to get a little spooked and decided I'd rather not go through the woods after all. Instead, I went back to my friend's house and retrieved my bicycle to ride home. I guess the sighting of the ball of light gave me a little adrenaline surge, as I no longer felt too tired to bike home and was too spooked to venture through the woods. I never did see the light again, despite many attempts at looking for it. I did, however, hear similar stories from people in the area who had seen something almost identical at various times.
That's a good one. I really like that. And the
That one reminds me of you, just
yeah,
because, like,
yeah,
you wasn't afraid.
yeah. There were definitely similarities there. The big difference is that he only saw one.
Right, right.
You know, and that's interesting to me too. It's like why are sometimes there several? Why is it sometimes
Like,
there's one?
what's the deal?
Yeah, and but yeah, I think that was great, and it even brought up the fact or the observation that these things are similar to lanterns, which is where the whole jack-o'-lantern myth came from.
Yes.
And yeah, it's they do, the glow of the light looks similar to a lantern from what I saw. So, and a lot of people say the same thing. Now, this story was an account reported to MUFON. I think it was around 2011, somewhere around there. And but I read it in a book called The Complete Story of the Worldwide Invasion of the Orange Orbs by Terry Ray.
Okay.
And this story was actually where I used to live a few months ago for about 5 years in Wilmington, North Carolina. My son and 3 other men were over a mile off the main road on the Cape Fear River fishing all afternoon. Just before dark, my son wandered into the woods to maybe spot deer feeding in the afternoon. I decided to walk up the 2 rutty, muddy roads with thick woods on both sides to the main road because fishing was slow. The guys had a fire right on the riverbank, and so I told them that I would be back in a little while. As I was walking along the road, I was hearing lots of scurrying in the woods on both sides. I had no flashlight and thought, man, there are a lot of deer around because this area is known for lots of wildlife. As I made it along, I was unnerved at the sounds in the forest. So I found myself steadily looking to maybe see what I thought was deer, and maybe it was. The woods were really dark. The road leads to a field which is maybe 200 yards or more wide, just short of the main road. As I came up on the hill to the edge of the field, I was shocked to see 3 large orange balls moving down towards the ground and towards myself, and they stopped just over the trees, maybe a mile away or closer, and hovered there. I knew it was not natural. I am a commercial pilot, and I know aircraft. I stood in shock, thinking this cannot be real. I stayed maybe 10 to 15 minutes, then began to feel nervous. So I made my way back to the men on the river in a hurry, mud and all. I then, in a panic, took off looking for my son, who was 17 years old at the time. And as I started into the woods calling him, he came towards me totally shaken, telling me, "Dad, you will never believe me, but I've been hiding from aliens."
Shit.
I am scared they are in the woods. I believed at the time he had seen something. He was serious. I told him, "Junior, I just saw 3 orange UFOs up at the road, and it scared me, so I came looking for you." We made it back to the river, and my son excitedly began to tell the other 3 men what we had seen, and they started on the both of us. What I did not know was the 3 of them saw the same thing as my son during that time. The sequence I am not sure of, but we all saw the same. It was a clear, cold night. Stars were bright, and about that time, one of the other men holding a fishing pole hollered to look up, and to all our amazement, the stars looked as if 6 to 8 of them from different parts of the sky moved very fast, seeming to converge in a group. Then all of a sudden, 3 of the objects side by side came over our heads and landed or went out of sight on the other side of the river, maybe 200 to 400 yards away. All 3 lights were round, bright, white, blinding lights as big as maybe 100 yards in diameter, all side by side, all touching down or going out of sight in the forest, just on the other side of the river. It scared all of us so bad. The 3 friends of mine, along with my son and myself, dropped our fishing poles, screaming, "Let's go home." We left our poles and were all speeding up the muddy road to the main road, each and every one in a panic. Some of the men were fussing, "Take me home. First, I need to find my wife and children." When we made it to the top of the hill, this is where the trees on both sides end and the field starts. I slammed on the brakes. All of us were in shock to see what looked like a brilliant white egg-shaped sphere with a tail with long spikes all around the middle and front section, hovering 20 feet over the main road, 200 yards from us, and it looked as if it, or the spiked part of it, was making slow revolutions. This, I tell you, this is true. 4 grown men as old as 50 and my 17-year-old son were frozen in my truck looking at this thing straight in front of us. The lights were brilliant white. The object then appeared to raise up, started down the road in the direction that we intended to go, and then it shot off just over the trees and out of sight. The 3 orange balls were no longer there. All 5 of us were terrified. We raced to Donnie's home first. He ran to the door and his wife came out. We all told her of the story and we're all looking at the sky. Gene, 50 years old, lived next door. We ran him home and then raced to David's home. His wife came out to meet us, and all of us witnessed strange lights over the trees behind his home. My son and I started home to see cars stopped all along the side of the road looking at the same lights. We made it home and were terrified, trying to calm down. We found ourselves sitting in what we call the Red Room, which is my private study off of my bedroom on the rear of the home, staring out the window at the sky. I live on 6 acres of land, and we have a large dog kennel just in the woods behind my home, and a Chesapeake Bay retriever who lives on my back steps, a guard dog. She lets us know if anything from a person to a squirrel is on our property. We were home maybe 4 hours and calmed down a lot. No TV, didn't have one at that time. I guess it was around 1 to 2 a.m., and there was a noise that sounded sort of like a prop jet that flew treetop high right over the house. I ran outside and could see nothing. Within 30 to 45 minutes, all the dogs in the kennel were roaring. They are all hounds, and they will tell you when there is something there that is not supposed to be. At that time, my retriever was going crazy, hair standing up on her back and barking towards the kennel. My son was scared, but I convinced him to go with me to see what the dogs had stirred up. My son and I opened the door, and the retriever took off. You see, most of the time, she will not leave the patio unless I go out if she is stirred up. There was frost on the ground. We didn't even have shoes on. We took off behind her, and she ran just behind the kennels, and all of the dogs were roaring her, and her hair was standing up, and she was barking at something in the bushes along with the other dogs. Then she took off after whatever it was, and so my son and I ran back down the road that leads to the kennel to my backyard at the very rear of the property, trying to cut off whatever it was she was chasing. When I got to the blueberry hedge, which is at the very rear of the property, she was still making her way to me in a roaring like panic. At that time, I stopped, not really scared, but kind of numb, to see this maximum 4 feet tall creature, person, alien staring at me. It looked as if it had a clear glass-like covering around it. It appeared to have a faint glow of red and black. On the face, I could see nothing but what looked like a red set of goggles and a black covering over the lower part of his face, sort of like a mask. The body appeared to sort of glow. I could probably draw it better than explain it. It then disappeared just as my son and the dog got right up on it. And my son then told me, "You see, I am not crazy." This was the same description he had told everyone. I will not go into detail, but my son and I were committed to an insane asylum by our family because they really thought we were crazy. We were released within 2 days, and then my father came to me and apologized when he said he had heard on the radio the news that lots of people had been seeing strange lights, and that the government reported that a Soviet satellite had fallen that same night. I am 45 years old with 4 children, a churchgoer, retired builder, and commercial pilot. I have been ridiculed, committed along with my son, and oppressed to say anything, but I know what I saw, and 4 other men will say the same. I have been since hooked on UFO files, trying to find others that have had the same experience. I will take a lie detector, be hypnotized, whatever, to bring the truth to the public. My son and the other 3 men all saw the same and have their own accounts. Thanks. Yeah.
That's fucking crazy.
I like that one.
Red goggles.
Yeah, that one had it all.
That's
it
crazy.
Had the lights, the craft, the humanoid. It's like, wow, where does it end? Jesus.
Yeah, that is crazy.
It's a good one.
Hey, but guys don't leave their fishing rods behind.
I know.
That shit don't happen.
I know. I know. And these, guys, like, we all know guys like that. Those aren't like,
yeah, easily scared. Yeah.
Easily. Yeah. Most of those guys,
they're out in the night in the woods all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Outdoorsman types,
Really short, just because I was excited and it's interesting, so it's short. But this is from Shot All to Hell, Jesse James and the Northfield Raid and the Wild Escape. It's from that book.
I love it.
And this is just a blurb from the book. It says, strangely, Jesse believed in the supernatural. Charlie Ford, a gang member who, with his brother Bob, assassinated James in April 1882, described a late-night incident where a ball of fire rolled across the road and underneath the horses he and Jesse were riding. Ford had never seen anything like this, and it frightened him. But Jesse told Ford he had been visited by these balls before, and each incident was followed by this trouble. They were
Wow.
meant to be They were meant to be warnings, he said, and he took them seriously. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that seems to be a common belief throughout time, is that these things are
Like
messages of death coming or trouble.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think a lot of people interpret them that way, which is odd because it's not odd, but I mean, I figure it's definitely a freaky thing seeing these, but I didn't feel that way at all when I saw what I saw.
Right.
It was not.
You were more
It
like the
wasn't
kid
scary.
in the story I told that was like, I didn't even think to be scared. Like, you to it. So,
Yeah, 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 yeah. It was. Yeah, it was the opposite reaction. But I've heard plenty of people. I've heard plenty of counts, and like I've told you about how much I respect Nicholas Schreck, and I think he's a brilliant guy.
mm-hmm.
He's had encounters that he says right when it started, you knew it was malevolent.
Mm-hmm.
It just had that vibe,
Right.
you know, like these
Right.
things were not friendly. So I think you know, yeah. Which but there's definitely some people, understandably, who they see anything like that, they're gonna flip the fuck out right away, you know.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I'm
Mm-hmm.
fixing my coffee, and then I'll read another.
Okay. All right. This one is from Strange World by Frank Edwards. It's an old one. It's an old stinky paperback. Oh my God, if I could see it. Okay. All right. Rendezvous with a Light. Maryland State Trooper Bob Burkhart drove on through the town of Hebron and swung off on a shortcut that would take him and the sergeant beside him back to the main highway. It had been a dull, uneventful evening. The sort that makes police officers very wary, for they always suspect the calm before the storm.
Yeah.
Jogging along the side of the road at about 20 minutes until midnight, Burkhart spotted a dim yellow light in the center of the highway a couple of 100 yards ahead. He slowed down quickly, for the narrow country lane was a poor place to encounter some farmer with a lantern hanging on the back of a wagon. In seconds, the light was only yards away. The trooper slammed on the brakes and slid to a halt in a cloud of dust.
Oh, wow.
When the dust settled, the two troopers realized that the light was hovering not more than 20 feet from their car, right in the glare of the headlights, just sitting there in midair about 5 feet off the ground, as though awaiting their next move. There was no wagon, no truck, nothing, just that glowing yellow ball of light. Burkhart started his engine again and pulled back onto the road. The light zipped away from the car a couple of 100 feet in a fraction of a second. Then it stopped again. The troopers shot quick glances at each other. Burkhart's partner drew his gun and rolled down his window. The car sped forward with lights on bright. The ball of light again bounded away from them. No matter how the troopers varied the speed of their car, the light easily maintained the same distance from them. Presently, it just blinked out, and the shaken troopers sped off down the highway. Fearing ridicule, they made no official report that night on this phase of their experiences, but they quietly alerted some of their fellow officers. And Burkhart, along with 5 off-duty troopers, went to the same area the following night. They found the light waiting for them. On foot, On foot, the men separated and then moved in on the thing, which all of them could see as it hovered over the road. When the ring of men had closed to within 15 or 20 feet of the glowing ball, it blinked out. A minute later, it lit up again in a nearby field, as alert and elusive as ever. The road, now known as Church Street, extended, has been the scene of unusual phenomena for more than 70 years, according to residents. Hundreds of persons have seen the light, especially since the story of the troopers' experience was published by the Salisbury, Maryland newspaper in July of 1952. Isn't that good?
That's great. Yeah, I love it. And
They
when
fucking
it made
turn on the lights and go fucking chase it.
and shoot it. But it made me think of something that I've been thinking about lately is like usually if you know me at all, I will, if I haven't already, I will eventually ask you, so you ever seen a UFO, a ghost, Bigfoot, anything like that?
Right.
You know, especially if you're police or military.
Right.
Because it's, I just, you hear so many of these crazy.
And think about it, like the people that are out there at night working, not that it has to be at night, because a lot of times it's evening, but just people that are like out there for jobs, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and they know their local area as well, and like you said, they're always out there. And even if which I think a lot of them have seen stuff, but even if they don't, they hear about it, because a lot of people, especially before the internet, if it was weird enough, they called the cops. You know, so they've probably heard it all, you know.
They probably
yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. I like that one. This is from excellent book we just picked up called North Carolina Ghost Lights and Legends by Charles F. Gritzner. And this is the early station light ghost light. This is kind of right at the North Carolina Virginia border. It's about 6 hours from me, so it's not anywhere close to me.
So like Shore, Virginia.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. It's off North Carolina 42, and there's a little town, I think it's called Ahoskie or Ahoskie, Ahoskie, and this says it's right at Brick Mill Road, and it's along the railroad, which a lot of these lights are associated with railroads for whatever reason. Okay. During the past half century, I have seen many of the country's better known ghost lights, but absolutely nothing could have prepared me for the remarkable display of lights seen during my 2 visits to Early Station Road. Most ghost light sites have their own characteristic display. That is, what is seen is always somewhat similar. But here, lights present a stunning kaleidoscopic array of varied colors, motions, sizes, shapes, and positions relative to the tracks. They are also quite reliable. The lights have put on a dazzling show with as many as a dozen strikingly different appearances during each of my visits.
Oh.
Reportedly, lights dance above the tracks throughout the night and appear year-round, although some reports suggest that they are most active in the early evening during summer months.
Mm-hmm.
God, I wish I was closer. The early station lights may, in fact, be the nation's best kept ghost light secret.
Right.
Surprisingly, no mention of them appears in any of the comprehensive national list. Furthermore, very little information pertaining to the lights exists in the literature or online, and amazingly, I spoke with a number of local residents who are unaware of their existence. Before describing any ghost lights, it is important to understand the environment in which they appear. Lights, of course, must have some cause, of which many possibilities exist. Yet the immediate area offers none of the usual possible sources of illumination, such as swampy conditions, buildings, power lines, or other structures. There is, however, a light source that may confuse many viewers. Looking westward at a distance of about 2 miles, Brick Mill Road crosses the railroad at a northwest-southeast angle. It is probable that some viewers are confused by the lights of vehicles that appear briefly as they cross the tracks. These lights, however, are easily recognized as such. Descriptions of the lights vary greatly. Based on their descriptions, no two of several dozen viewers who shared their experiences online seem to have seen the same thing.
Wow.
This confirms the display's amazing diversity. According to a local resident, when one looks west down the track, a bright light may appear. Other viewers, many of whom are anonymous, describe the phenomenon as a single white light that appears to maintain the same intensity, size, and distance, a light resembling that of an oncoming train, or what looks like a flashlight in the distance, but about 8 feet in diameter when it reaches the viewer. A trusted informant, James Allen, saw the light and described it as a bright flashlight, which moved across the tracks from side to side. It then disappeared, only to appear again a moment later as a light facing us, before disappearing again. What is most interesting about these descriptions is that the viewers all saw bright white lights, and in each instance, the lights behaved in a somewhat similar manner. In his book, Ghost of the North Carolina Shores, Michael Rivers describes the light as follows. Since the 1920s, a single light has been seen along the edge of the tracks, rising and stopping in the center of them. The light then begins to move. It neither floats nor bounces as it makes its way down the track, seemingly toward you. Rivers describes the light as being yellow-orange in color and about the size of a basketball. Some other witnesses also describe lights appearing in various colors. During my visits to the site, I have never been disappointed. During my first viewing in 2012, a number of lights appeared. Several were bright white flashes seen for a second or two just above and near the tracks, and much closer to Brick Mill Road than to my vantage point. About the time I was convinced that all lights had the same appearance. A pink glow appeared high in the trees to the right, north of the tracks. It remained visible in the same spot for perhaps 20 seconds before it slowly began to fade away. No sooner had it vanished than an orange ball of light about the size of a basketball suddenly appeared. It hovered over the tracks for perhaps 5 seconds before it slowly dimmed and vanished. Surprisingly, none of the lights that I saw appeared to move up or down the tracks. But one bright white light did move in a spectacular way, like a Roman candle. It shot straight up well above the treetops and out of sight. During my second visit, a variety of lights once again presented an absolutely amazing display. A yellow light that looked much like the beam of a flashlight appeared on the left side of the tracks, zigzagged its way down the rails for a short distance, and disappeared. Several minutes later, a bright white light appeared to the right and slightly above the tracks. It blinked off and on numerous times over a period of several minutes. During much of the time this light was visible, a small yellow light appeared to shine right on the tracks at a short distance in front of it. Finally, a faint red light that looked as if though it was shining through a fog appeared above and to the left of the rails. It fluttered from left to right through the trees before slowly fading out of sight. The variety of colors, shapes, and sizes, locations relative to the rails, and movement make it extremely difficult to identify a possible energy source for the early station lights.
That's crazy.
I know. Based on my experience, however, this is one of the country's most extraordinary and as yet unexplained ghost light displays. And all these seem to have legends. The legend with this was there was a railway. I think this is the same as the Mako lights in Wilmington, which, according to this book, are no longer seen. Yeah, the legend is that one of the railroad workers was decapitated in a train wreck, and it's him looking for his head.
Right.
And yeah, and then I think another legend was that it was two trains crashed into each other, and it's like a ghost train. You know,
like, right.
that's what the light is. Yeah.
But just that, like, he experienced stuff like so many times.
Yeah, like,
because how
like
many times do people go to a place like that they hear about and nothing, you know?
And he said the same about the Brown Mountain lights. He said the first night he got there, he said he went to there's 3 overlooks that most people go to, and he said the first night he was out there was like a dozen people already there waiting to see the lights at sunset. Right. And so within minutes they all started seeing lights.
Wow.
You know, it's like, wow, man.
Right.
Yeah, I've been there, but it's been a few years. Hold on. Sorry.
But you didn't see, did you see the lights?
No, I didn't. I didn't even go to the overlook. And at the time, I hadn't really become obsessed with these things.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And I had just known about the ones I saw, and maybe, you know, heard a couple other things, but I camped out with a friend at Brown Mountain beside the river, and it was one of the best times camping I've ever had. Yeah, it was paradise. It was awesome.
Nice.
Beautiful. In fall, so it wasn't hot, wasn't cold. It was perfect and primitive, right? Not like a campground. Oh yeah, totally primitive. We hiked not too far. It's not from the from parking. I forget the name of the trail or that part of the park, but it was not too strenuous of a hike, probably a mile or 2 in before you get to the river. And there was a few other people out there too, but we had tons of privacy. It was really spread out and right by the river. It's a beautiful place. Beautiful place. But yeah, I haven't seen the lights there.
Right.
And that's about.
And the next one I have is from Dallas Morning News, October 4th, 1892.
All right.
Strange vision. Citizens of Callisburg are greatly torn up. Gainesville, Cook County, Texas, October 3rd. The people living in Callisburg community, 12 miles east of Gainesville, are greatly torn up over a strange vision that appears nightly on the old Cy Ferris Callisburg. It appears at times in the shape of a large ball of fire, and again is in the shape of an illuminated man. Hundreds of people have occasions. Quite a number of the best citizens of the community in town today vouch for the statement that it is there. Among those who are here today are Green Norman, E. Phelps, and Gaston Hawkins, and they gave the newsman a graphic description of the phenomenon. They say it sometimes appears as a bright light, sometimes again it is blood red, and then it will appear in all the colors at once. Just before the light appears, a noise resembling that of a person falling heavily upon the floor is heard about the house. Hundreds of people are flocking there nightly to see it. Last Saturday night, October 1st, there were nearly 200 people on the ground at one time, some of whom had come all the way from Grayson County. Quite a number have chased the thing on horseback, but it flees when anyone approaches.
Oh, wow.
It was first seen one night during last December by a young man while sitting up with the corpse of a man named Bidwell, who had suicided by shooting himself in the head. He saw it then in the shape of a man, but it was not seen again until a few weeks ago, and since nightly. It is a mystery, and one that is puzzling the heads of a large number of serious people. That one's crazy, right?
Oh, that's beautiful. That's a good one. And not only that, suicided as a verb is great.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I just have visions of like country bumpkins out there shooting at a fucking light.
Shooting at the light.
Yeah.
They're chasing
Yeah.
with their horse. Oh, wait,
that's a good one. I have something. This could really fit into any episode, but I like it a lot. It this is just a post from Nicholas Schreck on Facebook a long time ago that I saved. I do believe Jung's theory that the sudden wave of UFO sightings after World War II was more of a spiritual phenomenon, similar to earlier holy sightings, than a scientifically explainable manifestation. I am certain that each being interprets spiritual beings through the prism of their own cultural blinders, unless the observer has attained a very high state of initiatory objectivity. So many of the more credible, quote, alien encounters are similar to encounters with elves and other beings from the fairy realm that it seems certain that these are simply differently perceived aspects of the same type of supernatural activity. There are so many other beings here on this earth with us that are not accounted for by science. It's inevitable that secular minds will assume that these are literal, material extraterrestrials rather than spiritual entities, as have been reported since antiquity. Now, that right there is the most next to John Kill. That is the best way I've heard it put. Yeah.
Yes.
In my opinion.
This is totally random, but it reminded me of my favorite comic book.
Yeah.
Sorry.
What's your favorite comic book?
Secrets into the Mystery.
Yeah.
And it's basically, it's about this guy who he's like, I think he's a writer. I read it in the 90s, so I didn't look it up for the episode, but he's a writer, and he's, he does a lot of drugs. he's kind of falling apart. He's divorced. He's lost his wife, but he still has his daughter who comes to visit. He's trying to get his shit together, and dreams and stuff where these little demons are like coming to him in the night and stuff. And then he remembers stuff that happened in his past that wasn't good. But so then he becomes like obsessed with experience. So he becomes obsessed, and he meets these other people, like these one old lady are visited by aliens, and somebody else it's angels, and somebody else it's this. But like he feels like they're all the same experience as him, but they like one person sees an alien, one person sees an angel.
Right.
There's like the magician is this character in it that's like kind of orchestrating things, and then he finds his spirit guy. He has to find his spirit guide, and it's this bum in the park that's pissed. Like he finds that's his spirit guide, like Charlie Limbo as a spirit guide. But it's like about that. It's about how we all kind of spiritually experience things, but might kind of give it a different face, based on who we are. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely. And yeah, it's funny. I think about that a lot. And but like, to be clear, I definitely believe there is some supernatural phenomenon at the center of it.
mm-hmm.
It's just the way it manifests is constantly changing for whatever reason,
Right.
And it's what's like you were saying the other day about how our brains are the key.
Mm-hmm.
Are the person having this experience is one of the parts of it that makes the experience. And it's like the miracle at Fatima. People came away saying they saw different things,
Right.
And
or I love like on Strange Familiar some of the accounts where one person saw a white Bigfoot, the other one saw you know what I mean, like a brown
and then
one.
The other guy saw nothing.
Yeah, that's right. The one guy didn't see anything.
Yeah, the other guy was looking at the other two like, what the fuck is going on? Like.
And now, for our blind portion, the question was, have you experienced lights? And I will go first because I have not experienced a spook light or what we've described earlier. But I have seen flashes of white light for most of my life. It's random. I could be inside or outside. It doesn't seem to matter. They do move like across the room or flash on and off, and like the size of like a baseball, like not big, but and it's not my vision. It's not something that happens all the time, and I've always taken it as like a high five, like a spiritual high five or thumbs up or something. Thinking about like, so I take notice of what I'm thinking about at the time, or that's what I start.
Wow.
So
So did
that's,
they appear and disappear really quick?
yes, but they can
Yeah.
do it more than once. Like they can linger a little bit. Do you know what I
Oh
mean?
wow.
Like come closer or move to the side or, flash on and off.
Yeah.
But and it's completely random. It hasn't happened for a long time. But it has happened for most of my life. And I just automatically just took it as as just some kind of like high five. So
I would take it the same way. Yeah, I love it.
now you, on the other hand,
I have seen the lights. It was Christmas Eve 2014. I was moving to the mountains the next day. I was moving into a cabin right beside Mount Mitchell, which is near the North Carolina Tennessee border, and living in Hickory, North Carolina, where I live now. And I was, because I was ending this job, I was taking back all the sets of keys I had for this to my boss for this job. And my boss lived out in the country, near the country club where a lot of rich people live. It's really beautiful and lots of land out there. And it was 8:30 at night. I'm driving down this road, and all of a sudden, this orange ball of light, about the size of a cantaloupe, whizzes in front of my windshield, like inches away.
shit.
And I'm like, oh my God. And I don't know why I reacted this way, but I immediately pulled over to the side of the road, immediately,
Right.
to see what this was or whatever. And pulled over to the side of this road, and there was like a field there. And I get out, and right when I get out, I stand up and look, and right in front of me are a dozen of these
Shit.
orange orbs of light, and they're just floating in the air. Some of them were kind of whizzing around playfully. Some of them were just hanging there, and these things are like 5 to 10 feet away from me. They're right there.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm just staring in awe at these things. I have no idea what I'm looking at. And I'm going through everything in my head. Like, these aren't Chinese lanterns.
Right.
They're
Yeah, your brain's going through a checklist. Like, what is this?
everything. What is it? What is it? And so I'm staring at them, and it was almost like a dimmer switch where they would change their intensity, and they would go down to almost nothing and then come back up. And all of them independently were doing this. And so I was staring at one because I'm just in awe, like trying to figure out what are these, and it almost looked like the inside of a light bulb, like guts, like the inner mechanisms of an object.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
then these things would dim to nothing, where they would disappear, and there was nothing there.
Right.
So it wasn't an object,
Right.
It looked like an object, but it wasn't. It was light. And so I just stood there and I was digging it. I really liked this. It didn't seem malevolent to me. They seemed almost friendly. I felt honored that I was getting to see this, whatever it was.
Right. You weren't afraid. No, you
Not at
didn't
all.
feel. Right.
Not at all. And I felt euphoric. I was almost entranced. And it was so bizarre. It's one of the most profound moments of my life. And I just stood there. It must have been about 3 or 4 minutes, and then it was almost like they were like, well, okay, we're gonna go now. But after we know like after we had this little time together, and they just took off slowly.
They just drifted away.
They just drifted away. they were totally stopped, and
Right.
then they just all led in a path together away, and then all of them blinked out.
Oh, wow.
And they were gone, and I stood there for maybe a few minutes, just fucking flabbergasted.
Right.
And and I looked, I just taking in, processing what had happened. And yeah, it happened. And I think from what I remember, well, one thing that happened the next day, I woke up and my eyes were swollen,
Oh, shit.
almost swollen shut. I had conjunctivitis for about 2 or
Oh,
3 days.
shit.
Yeah. And my eyes were red and bloodshot and burned. And that happens in a lot of cases.
Yes, it
Over
does,
the
right?
years I've read. Yeah. And but yeah, it was amazing. And the weirdest thing about it, I think about now, one of the weirdest things was I kind of put it out of my head for a while.
And you hear that too.
Yeah, it was.
Don't you hear that? Like,
Yeah, and yeah, and I read a case the other day where they had said the same thing, and I for a few years I think I thought about it here and there, but and then it just hit me one day. I was like, holy shit! Like
I
that
have
actually happened to me. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
experiences like that too, where it's like you just your business,
Yeah.
it's out of your head, and then
Yeah. Oh, another thing about that. So, a few years later, when I start thinking about it again, I get obsessed, kind of. I start reading more, going down the rabbit hole that I'm in now with this stuff. I had, yeah, it was a couple years later, maybe a couple years later, I reported it to MUFON. And so my report's on there. It's December 24th, 2014, Hickory, North Carolina. Anybody, I think, can get on and read it. Don't you have to have a membership to read? There's other sites where you can read them, I think, without the
right.
membership. But anyway, that same night, there were over a dozen of the sightings of the exact same thing all over the country.
Wow.
Yeah,
Not in your area.
Not in my area at the same time. So that's one of the more interesting things about this is this particular incident wasn't associated with a site. Now, I don't know if where this happened at, if people have seen anything out there before. I have no idea. But
right.
all over the country, that same night, people saw
Which
the exact same.
Okay.
Yep. Orange orbs hovering. Some people even put, like I did, I saw a dozen. Some of them said that, a lot of them said the same thing, a dozen, 12 objects. I'll go over a couple.
Okay.
Vista, California, same night at 11 o'clock, which would have been a few hours later. But Vista, California, my family and I were driving home from a Christmas Eve at my dad's house when my wife said, look at it. To my utter amazement, I saw orange fireballs. Spring Hill, Tennessee, at 11:44, 3 hovering orange round objects slowly disappeared into the clouds, no sounds. Another Spring Hill, Tennessee, 3 orange lights hovering over trees, then slowly follow each other off into the clouds, no sound. San Antonio, Texas, 11:30, These are all like the same time.
Right.
But in different states, different parts of the
Right.
country. 2 bright orange lights moving straight across the sky, no sound. Irvine, California, which is near where I used to live in California, at 8:50. About 8 fireballs over Irvine. Lafayette, Louisiana, at 8:17. 12 orange orbs glided across the sky of Lafayette, Louisiana on Christmas Eve. Pasadena, Maryland.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. 12 objects, reddish orange lights, low in the sky on Christmas Eve. Gilbert, Arizona, at 6:45, which because of the time zone difference would have been closer to when I saw mine. 3 orange lights over Arizona. Marysville, Washington. 3 orbs, UFOs sighted and documented Christmas Eve 2014. I think there were pictures of that one. But yeah.
That's crazy. It's
crazy.
a holiday. So
Yep.
like July 4th and New Year's Eve.
Fairbanks, Arkansas, North Hollywood, California, Red Lodge, Montana. It's all over the map.
So when you had your experience, there were also other experiences all over
the country. And it's insane. So that was definitely, if anybody wants to research, I'd highly recommend researching that day.
Right.
And
now when you were standing there, there were other cars along the road? Other cars came by?
It was confusing to me because I was standing on the side of the road, and like I said, I pulled off a little bit into this field that was there, but not too far from the road. But cars, because I was out there for a few minutes, and I remember the first time a car drove by, I looked back and was like, "Aren't you gonna stop? Like, are you not?" Because I would have stopped if I would have saw some guy staring at 12 orange balls of light on the side of the road.
They might have thought you were fucking scary.
I know.
What's he doing? I don't want to know.
So yes, I don't remember how many cars drove by. I know it was more than.
One did.
Yeah, at least 2 did, and
they didn't stop.
Nobody stopped, and there was a church. I'm really bad with distance, but within eyesight of this, and they were having Christmas Eve service. Like I said, it was like 8:30 at night, and I was so freaked out by this. Like after it happened, and I was standing in the field for a bit, I saw these people coming outside from the church, so I pulled in to the church parking lot, and there was a group of about 4 or 5 people, and I went up to them and was like, "Did you guys see anything?"
They're like, "What?"
Like I just saw these balls of light right there, and I pointed over and I said it was just bizarre. I just wanted to know if you guys saw that.
Right.
And one of the guys was like, it's Santa Claus and his reindeer.
And you're like, okay, whatever, I'm gone.
Yeah, you motherfucker. But the guy's wife or whoever, I don't know who this lady was, but she was genuinely like, wow,
right.
It's like, oh, you're one of my people, you're curious about. But yeah, it's unfortunately nobody else saw it, and there were other people around, but I guess they just weren't looking or whatever. I don't know why it picked me, but
not meant to.
My mind goes back to that because it's like,
and you were also in a liminal space.
Yes, I was.
You were you were moving the next day, right?
I was in that liminal space. I was moving.
You were finishing up errands so that you could move the next day, right?
Yeah, and I was ending a chapter of my life,
Right.
starting a new one, and
Right.
and was even in thought about this when this happened. The almost the second it happened.
Right.
So I go back to that a lot. Like, this thing flew directly in front of my face.
Right.
At the moment that I'm deep in thought about this, is there something there to that? Is it a coincidence, or did these things pick people for whatever reason? I don't know. And
Right.
but I think about it a lot, and yes,
keep looking.
Yeah, that's my story. I haven't seen them since, or I've seen weird activity in the sky before, but definitely like meteor showers, stuff like that.
Right.
Nothing close to this. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Yes, and we are on YouTube, Dark Notes Podcast,
and Spotify.
Yes, we are. We'll see you next time.
Okay.
Oh, one more thing. I can't think about Jack Parsons. And he's doing this ritual like every day. He's doing this operation or whatever.
Yes.
He sees
there were thousands of them all around, the accumulated dead, very much in the way that when you smoke DMT, then there are thousands of these things, and it raises the question, were they always there, or what's going on? St. Patrick, who brought Christianity to Ireland, found this belief. And also, Anita makes the point about sensitivity. In Irish folklore, there's the idea that if you have the eye, you can see these things, and no drugs are required. It's a psychic ability.